Buenas and half a day, everyone. Thank you to all of you who joined us here this afternoon. This informational hearing by the Committee on Child Welfare, Youth Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women's Affairs, Disability Services, the Arts, Culture, Historic Preservation, and Gatineau Restoration is hereby called to order. Today is Monday, September 22, 2025, and the time now is exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. For the record, in accordance to the open law, government law, notices for this hearing were sent on Monday, September 15, 2025, and again on Friday, September 19, 2025. In addition, this hearing was noticed on the Guam Legislature website and the Guam Public Notice website. I want to begin by thanking each of you for your presence and participation in today's informational hearing. Your time and commitment to the preservation of our island's cultural and historical legacy are deeply, deeply appreciated. I'd like to formally acknowledge the members of the committee and colleagues who have joined us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by Senators Sean Gumatautau, Senators Therese Herlahi, and Senator Vince Borja. Thank you, colleagues, for your continued support and engagement in this matter. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'd like to reiterate some general rules of conduct for those in attendance. The conduct of this hearing shall be as follows. Written testimonies shall be submitted to the committee. Questions, discussions, and testimony shall be confined in the nature of the agenda. As committee chairperson of Historic Preservation, I am honored and grateful for the opportunity to bring together agencies and stakeholders in this hearing to advance coordinated efforts in historic preservation. This hearing marks an important step towards enhancing transparency and unified action in the stewardship of our historic resources. We are here to examine the findings of the Office of Public Accountability's report number 2505, which reviewed the operations of the Guam State Historic Preservation Office and the Guam Historic Resources Division, particularly in the area of permit review and compliance. The report highlights several critical concerns, including outdated statutory framework, gaps in mapping and survey data, and procedural inconsistencies. The report indicates that these issues affect our ability to preserve and protect Guam's cultural and historical assets. To begin, we will hear a presentation from the Office of Public Accountability, led by Public Auditor Benjamin J.F. Cruz, who will walk us through the report's findings and recommendations. Following that, we will hear from Mr. Patrick Q. Lujan, Guam State Historic Preservation Officer, who will provide the agency's perspective and cultural current protocols and planned improvements. After these presentations, we will open the floor for discussion and testimony. We have invited a broad coalition of stakeholders to share their insights and experiences, including Guam Preservation Trust, Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Chamorro Affairs, Guam Historic Preservation Review Board, Guam Contractors Licensing Board, Office of the Attorney General, Department of Public Works, Bureau of Budget and Management Research, Department of Land Management, Guam Contractors Association, Joint Region Marianas, GTA Telecom, and Mr. Dave Lotz. So these are all the stakeholders and entities that we have invited. Your voices are essential as we work to strengthen coordination, clarify statutory authority, and ensure that our preservation efforts are both legally sound and culturally sensitive. Historic preservation is about honoring the stories, identities, and legacies that shape our island's soul. As we move forward, it is imperative that our statutes reflect, modern realities and evolving best practices in archaeology and cultural stewardship. This includes ensuring that our laws are clear, enforceable, and responsive to the needs of both preservation professionals and the communities they serve. Thank you again for your presence and participation. Let us proceed with the agenda and begin the presentation from the Office of Public Accountability. Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank the Public Auditor, Benjamin J.F. Cruz. Thank you so much, sir, not only for your presence today, but for your proactive leadership in this matter. Back in February, well, before the release of the OPA Report number 2505, in March, Public Auditor Cruz personally requested to sit down with me and brief our office on the scope and anticipated findings of this audit. That early outreach reflected a deep commitment to transparency and collaboration, and it allowed us to begin preparing for the necessary conversations and follow-up that we are now undertaking and that now we are confronted today. So I want to express my sincerest thanks and gratitude and appreciation, sir, for your assertiveness, for your clarity, and for your unwavering dedication to good governance. Thank you. His work continues to elevate the standard of public accountability across our institutions, and we are fortunate to have him as an invaluable partner in this effort. With that said, I invite Public Auditor Cruz to begin his presentation on report number 2505. Sir, please approach the panel. Thank you so much.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much for the invitation to make this presentation today. I should be really honest, I did not prepare the audit. This very capable group of young professionals next to me were the ones that prepared it. So I've asked them to make the presentation. They will introduce themselves as they do the presentation, but I'm very proud of the work that they've done, and I'd like to make sure that they get spotlighted and recognized for their efforts.
Thank you, Senator, for having us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for this informational hearing on OPA Report 25-05 on the Guam State Historic Preservation Office / Guam Historic Resources Division on the program area on review and compliance.
Sir, please state your name for the record. Thank you.
My name is Thomas Batung. I am an Accountability Auditor 2 at the Office of Public Accountability.
Hafide, I'm Leonani Leon Guerrero, Accountability Auditor 1.
And I'm Jarek Hernandez, Accountability Auditor 3.
So we did have a presentation prepared for you today. It'll be shown on the screen. Apologies, that is not our presentation. Thank you. So today we'll be discussing our report that was released back in March 2025. Next slide, please. And again, just to briefly introduce our audit team, today we have Benjamin Cruz, Public Auditor, Jarek Hernandez, Accountability Auditor 3, myself, Thomas Batung, Accountability Auditor 2, and Leonani Leon Guerrero, Accountability Auditor 1. Next slide, please. So the contents of today's presentation will dive into the objectives and scope, findings and recommendations of the audit, Typically, this is what we present to the agencies during our exit conference, as well as when we met with the senator. Next slide, please. Just a brief introduction to this audit before we get into the objectives and scope. We did initiate this audit due to concerns that we received from the public regarding delays in the review of their application process with the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. In addition to that, there were some highlighted concerns in the media. Therefore, the public auditor had decided to initiate this audit. Therefore, the objectives of this engagement were to determine, one, the Guam State Historic Preservation Office's use of statutory authority in alignment with applicable laws, regulations, and policies, and to also determine the Guam State Historic Preservation Office's processing of permits in compliance with applicable rules and regulations. Moving forward, I will also say either SHPO or GHRD to refer to the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. And the scope of the engagement we looked at was the fiscal years 2018 to 2023. Next slide, please. We had two main categories of findings. There are a total of 7. First main category of findings, we had concerns regarding the SHPO's law and rules and regulations, which addresses objective number 1, as well as category number 2, which is deficiencies in the SHPO's permit application review process, which addresses objective number 2. Next slide, please. To get into the first finding of our audit, it was the SHPO's operation was not in line with its codified law. So in our analysis and review, we had found that multiple sections of the codified law no longer align with the SHPO's current operations. There were inconsistencies in our review. We did note like some examples that we will state right now, like one, the Guam Historic Preservation Officer was listed as the executive director for the Guam Preservation Trust Fund, which is not the case. Secondly, another example, both in chapters 76 and 77 of Title 21 of the Guam Code Annotated, they do not mention or reference the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. They only make mention to the Guam Historic Resources Division, and it was with clarification from the agency that the Guam State Historic Preservation Office acts as such under the Department of Parks and Recreation. It was of note also during our review that we did look into the current active legislation. Majority of it that we noted was 54% of the active law was originated back in the 1970s. And even to look at a more total scope, 82% of the active law that was relevant to the SHPO specifically was originated prior to the 2000s, and 18% had been, the remaining 18%, 2000s up to the current day. The most recent revision or amendment being in 2021 and 2022. So majority of the law seems like long outstanding potentially for a update, but I'll just keep that brief. Next slide, please. So also in our view, the SHPO did make note that they had made attempts to draft legislation in the past with prior senators. And one of these is to clarify the Historic Preservation Office within the amendments. Another addition was to separate the DPR to the Governor of Guam. This because of the position of the Guam State Historic Preservation Officer along with the State Historic Preservation Officer are two different positions, one being federal and then the other being local. In addition to those amendments, we had revised the office positions, funding sources, and authority. And I think the major one to note of the authority was to shift the financial responsibility of construction, alteration, or improvements to historical cultural properties to private landowners and developers. So what that means currently is that when it comes to projects and project sites that include historical remains or artifacts, it is the responsibility of the SHPO's office to be able to pay, to be able to do either the construction, excavation, surveys, and site inspections, as well as repair damages to the land for specifically private landowners. So this is looking as far as shifting that financial burden of responsibility to the landowners and developers. Next slide, please. And so with that being said, the recommendation for this finding was that the SHPO and its oversight chair, along with the Guam legislature, should collaborate to draft and implement amendments to streamline the operations and prevent conflicts of their operations within the current legislative period. Just trying to bridge that gap between what was maybe passed back in the 70s up to the current day, as their operations do not currently match. Next slide, please. To go on, we have the second finding, which is the need for comprehensive mapping and survey of Guam. Within the Guam Code annotated, we did find that there was a responsibility of both the Department of Parks and Recreation along with the Guam Historic Resources Division, being the SHPO, to have this comprehensive island-wide database. Not only just is it for the agency to have this database, it's also stated that it's a requirement for the public to have access to this information. So currently as it stands, the SHPO maintains their own database to assess project impacts on historical artifacts within job sites and determine if more mapping and surveys are required. Currently, there is no comprehensive mapping system, so this has led to a dependence on SHPO's own internal database. Next slide, please. So in our recommendation, we did say that DPR, the Parks and Recreation and the SHPO's office should prioritize updating their database by surveying unassessed areas to fulfill their responsibility of creating a comprehensive island-wide record of historic and archaeological sites. Additionally, the database should be made publicly accessible to enhance transparency and informed decision-making. And this is also in effect to, like, if I were a civilian looking to do an application, have an application for my own project, and my site had, I guess, the risk of historical remains or artifacts, or if I'm a potential purchaser of land, this information would greatly benefit as far as being able to make an informed decision whether or not I would have issues with doing a project on that site. Next slide, please. The third finding we had was the SHPO's rules and regulations require adjudication process, require the need to go through the adjudication process. This was brought to the fact to us due to a December 2023 letter from the Parks and Recreation Acting Director at the time, who raised concerns about SHPO's authority. Currently, as it stands, the agency operates based on legal advice from the former Attorney General administration back in 2021. This was at the time to that audit. And then prior to 2021's legal advice, the office had followed internal guidelines from a former director, which was developed without rulemaking authority. Currently, under the agency had worked with the OAG to adjudicate their updated rules, regulations, and SOPs. And during our audit, even our office had made attempts to contact the Office of Attorney General. We did get an initial response, but we had none as far as any opinion on the 2021 legal advice and or their current operations. Next slide, please. And so in this recommendation, we just told SHPO to ensure that their rules and regulations and SOPs were undergo a thorough review and approval process through the Administrative Adjudication Act. Next slide, please. And the last finding for the category, we have the unauthorized imposition of requirements by the former state archaeologist. So the two examples we did mention for the unauthorized imposition, which exceeded the SHPO's, the office's authority, was one that they ordered a contractor to stop work and remove equipment from a job site without proper authority. And then the second was they required another private party to construct facilities, example being a reburial monument, public restrooms, and parking stalls as conditions for permit approval. Of all the concerns we did review, there was one that we also identified, the affected party, which will be referred to as Company A, which raised concerns with the Office of Attorney General regarding the SHPO's office. They notified the similar concerns as to what you see above, as well as conflicts within the two parties. But we did want to note that while we were in agreement that the imposed restrictions that they were excessive to the law, the Company A did agree to the terms prior to making that complaint in a programmatic agreement between the companies. And so I just thought that was noteful. And then when there was delays, then they terminated the agreement. Next slide, please. And then the recommendation for that was for the Parks and Recreation and GSHPO's office to establish procedures and controls to ensure that the agency operates within its statutory authority and obtains necessary approvals, if need be, for non-standard permit conditions. Next slide, please. Now we're in the next category of findings that we had, which were in regards to the permit application review process. In this, we did review their SOPs and in alignment to what, if they were in compliance with it. This is both finding number 5 and number 6. We consolidated them. There are 2 categories that we distinguish for the applications, the first being review and compliance applications, and the second being certificate of approval applications. And so just to kind of briefly explain, the review and compliance applications means that if I'm a civilian or developer and I need to obtain my clearance for my project, I go to the SHPO's office and they look at my project site and there's no issues or risk for potential historical remains or artifacts, then typically the SHPO's office will give me clearance to proceed with my project. Whereas certificate of approval applications go where there is that potential of human remains or historical artifacts or the potential unknown, so they may not have as much information on the site based on their database. And so those go more thorough review process and requires site inspections, surveys, etc. So that first category of applications, typically so we found within the 6-year scope period that we reviewed, there was 5,200 projects, and there were, of that 6-year period, we had reviewed or taken 71 samples, and we're only able to review 61 due to the remaining 10 were federal projects, meaning they were confidential, we couldn't access those documents. And then for the second, the certificate of approval applications, there were 247 projects for those 6-year period, and we selected 25 applications, which was again adjusted to 22 due to federal and confidential documents. But as you can see, majority of the applications that do go through the SHPO's office typically don't have as much issues, and it's the remaining few that typically need site inspection or a survey to be done. Next slide, please. So in our review of the applications, we did find similar deficiencies as far as to their compliance to their SOPs. We did find that they did not report the closure of their process. There was no documentation in alignment with their SOP. And then 2, there were missing attached required documents in the applications. So some examples would be a copy of a contractor's license, ownership documents, and or vicinity maps, to name a few. And then lastly, there were no documentation of processes such as inputting a project in their tracking log. Was there any record of a site inspection or impact determination, as well as a copy of the certificate of approval needed for applicants to be able to proceed with their project, as well as missing signatures and stamps. Next slide, please. And so in our recommendation, we did ask to implement a stringent permit application review process, including a detailed checklist of requirements, such as documentation of project status and completion, and also a systematic approach to storing and organizing application files for greater efficiency, since it seemed that with the missing documents, we looked at it as more of a record-keeping deficiency. Next slide, please. And then the last finding that we had was the DPW permit application form requires clear labeling of the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. Just briefly, if we could look in the next slide. So we did provide examples of the permit application checklists that are provided at DPW. In those, there is a checklist that pretty much states the list of agencies that one may be required to obtain to get clearance for their permit. And so these applications are typically used to guide applicants in obtaining necessary clearances for their projects. In the application seen above, Parks and Recreation is listed as one of the agencies, but under clarification with DPW and SHPO, it's understood that DPR or Parks and Rec or whatever it may be named on the checklist, it typically means Guam State Historic Preservation Office. So only the SHPO's office is supposed to sign off the clearance for that field. So we noted that this issue potentially increases the risk of circumvention of the SHPO process, or also increases the risk of a misinterpretation of the application form. So we did, in the next slide, the recommendation was to be able to revise that permit application form to accurately reflect the roles of relevant agencies to ensure proper routing of applications, in this case being revising the Parks and Recreation to be SHPO on the form, or indicating SHPO additionally if there is a need for the Parks and Rec for a different clearance. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the concerns and deficiencies that were highlighted emphasize the need for corrective action to streamline SHPO's statutory authority with current operations in order to improve its permit clearance process while still preserving and promoting the rich cultural heritage of Guam. And we did acknowledge in our audit that the SHPO's office is currently in works to address these matters. And that concludes the rest of this presentation. Thank you again for having us today, and we can proceed with the discussion as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that presentation. Is there anyone else who's going to offer testimony or explanation? No? Thank you. I truly appreciate that. At this point, I'm going to open the floor to my colleagues for if there are any questions that can be addressed. Sir, is there anything you would like to say? At this point, we're going to save the questioning for later and probably bring in SHPO first for their testimony. So I'd like to excuse Public Auditor Cruz and his team in the meantime and I'd like to thank you for your thorough presentation and for responding to the for laying out your report and with such clarity and candor. Your team's work in producing report number 2505 has provided us with a critical foundation for today's discussion. We deeply appreciate your early engagement with our office early this year and your assertiveness in elevating these concerns to the legislative level. Your leadership continues to be a cornerstone of good governance, and we are grateful to have you as a trusted partner in this effort. We now turn to the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. I'd like to begin by thanking Mr. Patrick Q. Lujan for not only for his presence today, but for his early engagement with our committee at the start of this legislative term. From the outset, Mr. Lujan has demonstrated a clear commitment to transparency, collaboration, and institutional stewardship. His long-standing leadership in historic preservation has been marked by assertiveness, responsiveness, and a deep respect for the culture and historical integrity of our island. We are fortunate to have such dedicated State Historic Preservation Officer whose unwavering commitment continues to guide our preservation efforts with integrity and purpose. Mr. Lujan, thank you for being here. The floor is now yours, sir. You are recognized.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Madam Chair, the 5 senators. I want to say hi to my mom. She's watching TV at home. But before I start, I'd like to really commend Thomas and the crew from the public auditors. They're very professional. They came in professional every step of the way. We got to know them really, really well. We are very open with our records and our processes. There's one day that we almost left him the key to the office to lock up because he wanted to work past 5 o'clock, so couldn't justify overtime there, Thomas. All right, let's go. Slide, please. All right, thanks again for having us. I think in a true sense of transparency, we're glad to be here. And like I told my staff when the audit initially started, this is a welcoming thing for different eyes to look at our processes and our program, and only to get better at what we do. So we welcome not only the audit, but also this hearing today. Slide. So just a quick understanding on the office itself. We do fall under the Department of Parks and Recreation with 21 GCA. Real Property Chapter 76 is the bulk of it. Chapter 77 also has some of descriptions of our office. Currently, we get $884,000 from local appropriation, which is about 64% of our budget. And from the National Historic Preservation Act, we get, this is probably the highest we've had at 484. This was as of last fiscal year. Coming up, however, with the new, or with the Trump administration, they pretty much zeroed us out. And that's across the nation for all the historic preservation offices. However, I know from a national standpoint, they're trying feverishly to keep that going. And so there's potential of having that brought forth again. But we normally average from low 400s to probably this is the peak coming off of last year. Slide. Just to go over our federal responsibilities, because we do have to abide by the federal laws and local laws. 36 Code of Federal Regulations is pretty much encompasses our responsibilities, and the different parts there you can see our responsibilities from managing the National Register of Historic Places, the procedures for SHPO programs, eligibility of inclusion to the National Register, having SOI, which is Secretary of Interior Standards for Treatment of Historic Property through our archaeological program, and of course, the overarching protection of historic properties. Slide. Our local laws, I put this up here because this is This is the genesis of historic preservation in Public Law 10-68 back in 1969. And if you see there, the speaker is actually Speaker Joaquin Arriola. And it was probably a 3 to 4 page document that really started the whole historic preservation movement in 1969. And the Public Law 20-151 is the bulk of it. So, and that's in the 80s where, you really had some really good visionaries in the legislature at that time. But that was decades ago, and putting things into practice today, obviously we have some recommendations to update our local statutes. Slide. So answering the OPA's report on 25-05 and the concerns regarding rules and regulations and the laws, the first recommendation about operations not in line with an enabling statute, we absolutely agree with this recommendation. There's many conflicting laws within our local statutes, where it's placed, the recommendation of removing the office out of DPR. I continue to foot stomp on that. And I think across the board, there's support and agreement to it from the different directors, the governor, and so forth. And I think that's a low-hanging fruit that we can really avoid any type of risk on other items, such as the permitting process. The need for comprehensive mapping and survey, it's really an unfunded mandate. We just can't possibly pull that off with the manpower that we have. We're just kind of getting into the groove of stabilizing the operations of the office, as opposed to a couple of years ago when we were really bleeding for help. As far as, conducting, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've got probably 30% of the island that's not surveyed, right? And surveys, you have a terrestrial survey, you have subsurface survey, you got maritime underwater survey. You start going to subsurface surveys, it gets very costly. So as much as we would love to fulfill that requirement, it's an unfunded area, and it could boil into the millions of dollars if we were to conduct that mandate. As far as the adjudication process for rules and regs, unfortunately, we lost a key personnel and haven't filled that position yet. And quite frankly, I think we have to, government-wide, I think that expertise of going to the AAA process is rare. Not many people have done it. I've asked around other agencies, and you probably have 1 or 2 people in each agency that's pushed through things in the AAA process. I've done it once, but that was like 20 years ago. And finally, unauthorized imposition of requirements, that was a one-off, and that was corrected immediately. And so a lot of our processes that was identified in the audit has been corrected. Again, the audit was between FY 18 and 23 as far as what they were looking at, and this audit was conducted earlier this year. So a lot of those processes that were evident on what they were looking at, we acknowledged that, and we had corrected that since then. Slide. Deficiencies in permit application. Again, reviewing compliance applications, we corrected prior to the audit. Certificate of approval applications were corrected prior to the audit. And as far as the deficiency for DPW permit application form, on the clear labeling on the application itself, we did send a memo from DPR Director Sablon to DPW Director Arriola just a few weeks ago, making that official request and recommendation that we do change the application process that makes a true reflection of historic preservation on the application, as opposed to just Department of Parks and Recreation. Vince can probably answer to that since he's here. Slide. Again, the justification for change of us getting out of an agency level. I think this is the most powerful one, is the under CFR 61-4, where the governor must appoint and designate the historic preservation officer to administer the state historic preservation program. It's a unique legislation. I don't think that it carries that from any other agency within the government of Guam or you know, where you have that designation. So in essence, you know, the SHPO's boss is the governor. Slide. And further, there's also a unique statute in the local law in Chapter 76, where higher authority shall not override the decision of the Guam Historic Preservation Officer. That has been done historically in different administrations, where we find, you know, directors and deputy directors signing off on behalf of the Historic Preservation Office. So all of that comes in line with the need to minimize that possibility and really focus on just that lane. And I can see how it could be misconstrued because it says Department of Parks and Recreation, and these customers may just go straight to the director's office, you know, asking them to review it, when it's really supposed to be our office that does the reviewing process. So those are just two big statutes as far as the federal and local side that, you know, pretty much justifies why we need to get off of the umbrella of an agency level. I think that's it. Slide. Yep. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. We'll go to the question portion later. At this point, I'd like to call in other individuals who would like to offer their testimonies. On my list here, Mr. John Ogden. Mr. John Ogden, please proceed and join us in the panel. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
You're recognized.
Thank you. Half-a-day senators, buenas, Senator Bora, Senator Gimtata, Senator Ada, Senator Calvo, Senator Talai. My name is J.P. Uggan. I am the Executive Director of the Contractors License Board. I am here today to provide an overview of the role the CLB plays with the understanding of construction activities, specifically in the context of historic preservation protocols and compliance requirements. The Contractors License Board plays a critical role in ensuring that construction activities on Guam are performed safely, professionally, and in accordance with the law. Our primary responsibility in the permitting process is to ensure that contractors applying for permits hold the appropriate license and are in good standing with the board. When a permit application is submitted, we verify the credentials of the contractor responsible for the project. This includes checking whether they possess the necessary qualifications and the license specific to the type of work being proposed. While conducting field inspections, CLB may encounter not permitted job sites. In such cases, the contractor found to be in violation is issued a citation and a fine. The details of the violation, along with the relevant documentation, are forwarded to the relevant agencies for further action. This collaborative approach helps ensure that construction activities adhere to regulatory standards and helps maintain the integrity of our process. The process of becoming a licensed contractor in Guam is designed to ensure that qualified individuals are entrusted with construction work and understand the laws and rules and regulation in every government agency involved in the process, including sensitive areas such as historic preservation. To obtain a license, an applicant must have a minimum of 4 years of hands-on experience in a specific field of construction for which they are applying. After meeting this experience requirement, the applicant must pass a comprehensive examination. The exam assesses both practical knowledge of the trade and the applicant's understanding of local laws and regulations. The CLB provides board-approved study guides to help applicants prepare for their exams. These study guides are available free of charge for the technical aspect of the trade, while there is a nominal fee of the law study guide. This helps ensure that contractors are not only proficient in their craft, but are also well-versed in the legal and regulatory framework that governs construction practices on Guam. The CLB recognizes the importance of collaboration in fostering a professional and well-regulated construction industry. We maintain open lines of communication with key stakeholders, including the Guam Contractors Association, the Guam Trades Academy. These relationships help ensure that licensed contractors remain informed about industry standards, regulatory changes, and best practices. While further education opportunities in historic preservations are not currently offered directly through CLB, we strongly encourage ongoing professional development. Contractors are encouraged to seek out training and resources that enhance their knowledge of construction techniques and preservation protocols. It is our belief that an educated contractor is essential to the success of any project. Effective interagency communication is essential to achieving the goals set forth by CLB. While challenges may arise in coordinating efforts between agencies, the CLB is consistently working with various government bodies, including the Department of Public Works, Department of Labor, and other relevant entities, to ensure that construction projects meet all required standards and regulations. Working together in these agencies has been instrumental in achieving positive outcomes for our community. In summary, the Contractors License Board plays a crucial role in ensuring that construction projects on Guam are carried out by qualified and licensed professionals who understand and comply with local laws, including those related to historic preservation. Through our permitting process, educational support, and collaborative with industry stakeholders, we are committed to fostering a construction environment that is safe, responsible, and respectful to Guam's historic and cultural heritage. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
I'm just here to support you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in this room who would like to tender their testimony? Director Vince? No? You're good. On that note, I'd like to call in the team of Public Auditor. Patrick Langhan is here. Mr. John, would you like to join us once again? And before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of my colleague and Vice Chair of our Oversight Committee, Vice Chair V. Anthony Ada. Thank you, sir, for being here. At this point, now that our panel is settled, I am going to open the floor for questions and would like to ask my colleagues if they have questions directed to the panel. I will start with the Vice Chair of our Oversight Committee, Vice Chair Anthony Ada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the, probably Mr. Lohan, on the unauthorized imposition of requirements, what was done to correct those improprieties that have been pushed onto the private contractor or those that were supposed to look for the, in order to obtain a permit?
What was the impropriety?
Oh,
Yeah, so the law says that...
recommended things that they needed to do before they obtained a permit.
So obviously, through the review process from our office, right? And, I mean, probably 90% of the permits that come through our office, it's a quick turn within a week, right? It's that 7 to 10% where we really scrutinize the location, the project itself, and we take deep dives, and it's about 7 to 10% of the projects. But we find it's pretty common where there's projects out there that are not permitted, big projects, from clearing to what have you. Those are clearing's probably a big violation out there that we try and stay on top of.
Is that where you're trying to look for the separation between Parks and Rec and SHPO on the permitting process to where they need to clear SHPO aside from Parks and Rec?
Yeah, so again, this is a DPW permitting process, right? And so we are just one of many in the review for permit requirements. And so it's supposed to be Historic Preservation Office from an archaeological cultural resource look, and as opposed to recreation or parks look. And so it's not a true reflection on the DPW permit or the application permit.
And has that already been adjusted to where that separation will be, or is that what we're still working?
As far as I know, it has not been. So.
Okay, I see. Director Arreola, can we get
Good afternoon, Senators.
Good afternoon. On the permitting process, on the application, is there going to be a separation now between Parks and Rec and SHPO, or is it still as one where they need to go to Parks and Rec for the clearance on the permitting process?
Yes, Senator. It still has the title, the name of Department of Parks and Rec. And again, we just follow the law. The law says Department of Parks and Rec. That's what we put. But I think given this situation and the fact that all our forms, most if not all the forms, including the building permit application, are pre-printed forms, so we've got thousands, if not hundreds of them. I think at least the immediate solution would be we could get a stamp that just says SHPO or what is it? State Historic Preservation Office review. Something like that, because I just looked at the form myself. There seems to be a little bit enough space. We could just get one of those rubber stamps and just do that for now until we reprint the form, and then we should be off and running.
Okay, just so we can kind of get a separation, right, between Parks and Rec, but can that be done without actually changing the statute?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure that we don't.
I can play in the sandbox.
Okay, thanks. So, Mr. Lohan, you're still looking at, and I think it was mentioned earlier by the OPA about the separation of SHPO and Parks and Rec, right? Is that going to be an issue with the budget for SHPO versus Parks and Recreation, or how do you delineate the two, Parks and Rec and SHPO, if
so it's already
separated from it?
Yeah. Within the agency, it's already delineated, and so I think just a shift of those funds from that agency over to, if we fall under the governor's office, then we just make that transfer. There won't be any need of any added budget in this regard. The only thing I ask is the building that it's kept with SHPO's office, and instead of moving us down to Adelup or wherever the case may be. I think it's a data center pretty much with two different sets of libraries, and our database is there as well. So it would be a huge undertaking if we were to relocate. So I think with the budget transfer and the building transfer, it would be a smooth transition into what would be properly placed.
So no change in statute as to having SHPO with the governor's office versus SHPO with Parks and Rec?
I'm sorry?
Would there have to be any,
yes, you have to change the statute, yes, because under Chapter 77, we fall under Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, right?
Yeah,
so there would have to be a...
You need legislation, correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. Madam Chair, that's the only question I have right now.
Thank you for your
comment.
questions, Vice Speaker.
If I might comment on your question, Senator.
Yes.
I think when you guys look at the legislation, you might also want to look at the State Historic Preservation Office and the HPO, the Historic Preservation, over here in Agania, the Preservation Trust.
Okay.
Because if you look at the original legislation for SHPO, they were supposed to have a governing board. And that governing board, coincidentally, is the same as the Historic Preservation Trust. In the beginning, at least the staff found, they met for a couple of years way back in the 70s. And then somehow when this other one was created, they split and they haven't had a governing board, an oversight board. But by name, it's all the same people. And also, I wanted to point out to your first question about what the inequity or what the problem was. In the original statute, the burden of correcting things was on the SHPO. Over the years, SHPO has tried to shift the burden to make the developer pay for certain things. And that was not the intent. And in fact, when we went back and looked at the legislation, there was an attempt for an amendment later on. I can't remember what year it was, Thomas, but there was an attempt at an amendment. It was introduced in the legislature. I believe it even had a public hearing, but the legislature never passed it. So that burden never shifted. So when the staff found that they were shifting the burden and having people build bathrooms, there was never any power given to SHPO to do such things. So that also has to be looked at. And I know they claim it to be an unfunded mandate, but the basis of the whole office was to do that survey, the island-wide survey. And I know Thomas tried to explain, but the reason for that, having the island-wide survey, is, as he said, is to help people make informed decisions. Am I going to buy this piece of property in Tumon, or is it going to cost me too much money to do this? If there's a survey that says this area, there's a potential for historic artifacts is much higher than these other areas, then that would affect the market price. That would affect what people would be willing to buy. But it's to get people to understand. It's like when whether you buy a piece of property that's R, or you buy a property that's A, and you want to build a warehouse, and you have to get it to M. I mean, that's going to be really difficult if it's in the residential area. In agricultural, maybe it might be easier. So to have that advanced knowledge, it really helps the buyers, the sellers, on whether or not it becomes more profitable, more valuable property to sell. But that initial responsibility that was mandated in '69 has to at some point be addressed. Whether or not you fund it and how much it costs, but it's imperative because people are having to make decisions about where they build things, and they need to know where they should or should not buy property if they don't have, to do the.
Thank you, Auditor.
Yeah, to that comment, I think it's a bigger issue because we've had customers come into the office looking at their property, and we say, yeah, there's high probabilities based off of where you're at, based off of different surveys that were conducted, and then they say, wow, we probably wouldn't have bought this property if we knew that we're going to have all of these potential issues. So I'm not sure what discussion or what forum that can be addressed. Probably this is probably not the forum, but that happens as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lohan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimonies, and thank you for answering those questions. Thank you, Vice Chair. At this point, I'd like to recognize a member of the Culture and Historic Preservation Committee, Senator Teresa Lahi. Do you have any questions?
Sure. First of all, could you just repeat what prompted you to do this audit in particular? Because it's not a finance audit, it's a authority audit.
Every year we do in fact, the letter should be coming out to you in the next week or so, asking all of you, the people that we call our stakeholders. We ask the stakeholders, what topics do you believe that the historic preservation, that the public auditor's office ought to undertake in the upcoming year? And we go through we receive all of those, literally hundreds. I think Thomas had to go through 200 and scale them and do all kinds of math and stuff to try to figure out which ones we were going to do. But when we sent out that letter, we did get a response from a business in the chamber complaining about the fact that they were being imposed upon to do certain things, that they were being made to jump through various hoops, and so we decided as an office last year that this is one of the studies that we should undertake. Because there was some headlines in the paper. It was of interest to the community, and it was a major issue. And so that's the reason why we undertook the audit.
All right, that's what I wanted to confirm, because if I recall, this controversy stems from one particular company refusing to comply with what the SHPO's office had been asking them to do for the burials that were found on their property, that they insisted had to be removed and not protected in place. So I think the SHPO's office allowed them to remove them, didn't mandate that they be protected in place, and in that, then they protested the requirements of reburying these, which all other companies and developers prior to that had. Those were being enforced. And
But with all due respect, ma'am,
I think
there was no mandate.
Well,
that,
I'm going to
required
get
them
to that,
do
yes.
Yeah.
So I noticed too that the audit never mentions any executive orders, but my understanding from the SHPO's office at that time was they were, for years, acting under executive orders, 89-9 and 8-24. Or I'm not sure, those are the only two that were pointed out to me, because that's how they had been able to get every other developer on Guam to either leave the burials in place or to rebury them in an appropriate manner. And that now, since 2023, now the SHPO's office is completely unable to stop developers from removing human remains, from requiring them to rebury them in any fashion, even requiring them to do studies of these properties, which I think at the GTA property they discovered was a village. Isn't that correct? But this is the problem. So yes, maybe the audit points out that the law, and that is a big problem, that the Preservation Trust, the SHPO, they have been aware. They both have drafts that are hundreds of pages long, and in the drafts, I had my own draft, but we have a disagreement as to what those drafts are going to come out to say. But all of that stemmed in 2023 when there was a letter written from Stephanie Flores, who had been appointed the acting director of the Department of Parks and Rec, ordering the Mr. Lujan, the State Historic Preservation Officer, to stop putting these requirements on GTA as a condition of their permit for their project at Alupang. I still think the law provides, and the audit doesn't, well, at least a summary, doesn't emphasize that there's still the law regarding human remains that says the department determines whether the disturbance of a burial may be necessary. If the department determines it is necessary to disturb the remains, according to Stephanie Flores, it does not. It does allow the removal, but only the removal at the expense of the developer using procedures and standards acceptable to the Guam Historic Preservation Officer. It doesn't grant the SHPO the authority to require any specific action regarding the reburial. That is all, I think, what former SHPOs creatively use as mitigation. So if they were going to say it's necessary to remove and you must remove, then you should rebury. But if they had already made an agreement like that and then in the end told you can't enforce your agreement with this company, I don't know. But I'd like to think that they would not have agreed that it was necessary then to remove those burials, or that they should have reprogrammed, worked around. We do this they've done this for decades. This is the reason why we have reburials at the hotels, we have reburials at the road projects, we have reburials on the military property. So I understand technically the findings of the OPA. I'm just saying,
And also, please read the legal advisory that was prepared by an Attorney General, questioning a lot of the things that they were doing.
Yes, I know.
And I've been trying to get the current general to address it, to see whether or not he concurs with it or whether or not he has a different finding.
All right.
We've written 3 letters. We've not been able to get any response from them on whether or not they're concurring it. But
Senator,
the way to address this is to change the law.
yes,
Senator. It is the responsibility of this body, and that's why we pointed it out.
I want to come back again for another round of questioning. Thank you for that answer and that question, but I'm just going to give the other senators for now. We'll have 5 minutes each, and then we'll go around again. So thank you, Senator. At this point, I'd like to recognize Senator Sean Gumatao-Tao, sir.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the panel for being with us this afternoon. 21 GCA Section 76512 established the Historic Preservation Archaeological Mitigation Fund within the Department of Parks and Recreation. Any and all funds generated through fines imposed by the Historic Preservation Office of the Department of Parks and Recreation shall be deposited into this Historic Preservation Archaeological Mitigation Fund. Expenditure of the fund shall be restricted to the following areas for the following purposes: the contracting of archaeological services as determined by the Historic Preservation Office, which includes some public education and awareness activities, and the purchase of supplies, materials, and equipment to support those activities. Now, I don't know if you can answer this, either Pat or anyone on the panel, but recognizing that the FY 2022 Budget Act, Public Law 36107, restored the requirement for building permit fees to be set aside for the Guam Preservation Trust Fund, what portion of the building fees revenue has been allocated for the Historic Preservation Division pursuant to 21 GCA Section 76602B, which requires $100,000 to be transferred to the Historic Preservation Archaeological Mitigation Fund in equal monthly installments? Pat, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, that was rescinded probably 2 legislatures ago, and it went back to GPT as 100%.
So it was enacted and then put back in play?
Correct.
So that means there's nothing that goes into that fund?
That is correct.
Okay, which gets me to my next question, and I'll stick with you for this. With respect to the OPA's finding that the former state archaeologists and Guam territorial archaeologists imposed requirements and conditions on permit applications that exceeded the agency's statutory authority, including unilaterally ordering a contractor to stop work and remove its equipment from a project site without proper authority, and requiring as we mentioned, might have heard earlier, requiring a private party to construct facilities including a burial monument, public restroom, parking stalls as condition for permit approval. What information is available regarding any legal challenges or claims filed against the government of Guam by the affected parties?
What is the legal?
Has there been any legal action, anything charged to the government of Guam?
Not that I know of, no.
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you so much. And why I'm asking this, and this is probably the more important question, because the OPA has, and Thomas, good work, by the way, to basically recommend policy to this branch. Obviously, it's different than the policy that you recommended as well in your presentation, Pat. But I just say from my humble experience that and no offense to you or to your previous predecessor, but there is extraordinary power given to the State Historic Preservation Office because of one federal law and one local law. And it gives authority that is so much greater and bigger than that at times of the governor of Guam. And there's instances where we see that in the Guam Code. The chief planner for the Department of Public Works, the tax commissioner for the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I think I might be missing one. But these have extraordinary powers that, quite frankly, I think, and maybe I can get the OPA's experience, but it seems that what he's asking and what you're asking in terms of policy, what he might be asking might be much greater than I think even the government of Guam today can perhaps even remotely give, considering how great that power would be in terms of that work, in terms of how they deal with construction and the like in Guam.
As far as we're concerned, if they have rules and regulations that are correctly adopted under the Administrative Adjudication Act, then great. But if you don't, then you don't. You may wish you had, but if you didn't, you don't.
So are you thinking that that was what has caused this, I guess, disparity over, gosh, almost 3 decades plus?
They thought that they had some rules and regulations, but it was never properly adopted. That's how we pointed out. The Administrative Adjudication Act is very, very clear about how many days you have to give, who it goes to, how many days of publication, how it sits here, whether or not, how long it sits here, whether or not your action or inaction is approval, but it has to be complied with. And if it's not complied with, then it was never adopted.
Oh, no, and I agree, Public Auditor, but do you feel that at times when you look at this particular statute, does it give such extraordinary powers to the State Historic Preservation Office?
It could.
That's fair. Thank you so much. All right, thank you, Madam Chair, for the questions. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Senator Gumatao. We'll go around again, but at this point, I'd like to give the floor to Senator Vince Borja.
Thank
You're
you,
recognized, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for being here today. So, we just heard in the presentations that obviously much of the statute guiding the SHPO is outdated, probably over 50 years in some cases. We also heard the Comprehensive Island-Wide Survey, which is a legal mandate that has never been completed and described as an unfunded mandate. The OPA audit also showed gaps in the permit process, missing documentation, record keeping, and the need for rules and regulations to be adjudicated. And the SHPO also responded by saying that many of these issues are either corrected or still pending because of funding and staffing limitations. Is that correct? Pretty much. Yeah, so I guess my question, and it's very straightforward, and what can we do today to start fixing this, right? I mean, if you can be specific, I know you talked about one of the mandates costing probably millions of dollars. But what do you think? I think based on what you presented, you have about a $1.3 million budget based on the funding. But what is sufficient funding? And what do you think what else do you think we can do as a legislature to give you the support?
Well, thanks for that question. So a couple of years ago, when the initial AG's it wasn't an AG's opinion at that time because that was under AG Camacho. It was a review from one of the lawyers. When that came through, it was a huge shift in operations based off of that. And we put together a potential cost analysis of if our office was truly to go out and conduct all of these surveys, it's pretty much a formation of another archaeological firm, so to speak, at about $1 million a year, just to build up that capacity. And that will take me 2 years at best to build that up. So if we were to go into that direction and have a government division specifically for that, it'll cost about $1 million a year with some time to build.
And that's just to get caught up. So if if you do all the surveys, what would be an annual? I mean, just could you foresee that being the annual cost for a very long time? Or?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you for answering that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Borja. Thank you for answering those questions. I'm going to give myself the time to ask. Public Auditor, may I ask, because the audit found that 90% of RC applications lacked final reports. It found that nearly applications lacked not just final reports, but that conditions of approval, or COA, were inconsistently tracked. These gaps undermine the integrity of the permit review process and complicate enforcement. So I'd like to ask you, what immediate procedural safeguards would you recommend to ensure documentation integrity and timely review?
If I can, I'll have Thomas answer that. But for the most part, they were doing their work. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't the final approval or a document that was missing. But they did almost everything. That's why Thomas said it was 90% were properly done, except for some final documents. But yeah, it just, when you have rules, you should follow them and follow them to the letter and do every step that it's supposed to be taken.
So basically there's a little gap. Do you believe that a centralized digital permit system across agencies would resolve these types of gaps? If so, what minimum data standards should be legislated? If we...
So just to add on that, it may potentially help. What we do know in that our review is that the database of the SHPO's office and Public Works may not align. Their record of permits that go through their office may not be the exact same as the permits that go through the SHPO's office. And this is due to the fact that maybe some clearances don't require to go to the SHPO's office, or maybe, again, if it didn't, it had been circumvented, or they weren't able to go to the SHPO's office but still obtain clearance, then there is a gap. So I would say that there is the potential, if they were in uniform, then that can maybe remove some of the gaps in between the two agencies.
It would be ideal if the government could speak to itself. I mean, I remember when I was a member of this legislature, I could never get over the fact that the Department of Administration Treasurer's Office, in the middle of the Revenue and Taxation Office, could not speak to anybody within 3 feet of itself because it had a completely different system. Because they didn't want, for fear of something, but I just couldn't get over the fact that they couldn't talk to each other. And I'm sure, as Thomas put it, the permits that went through Public Works would be probably 3 times the number that went through the SHPO office. But if they could share it, they could see what got away from them, what needs to come to them. But unfortunately, I don't know how to get them to talk to each other.
I see. Thank you for answering that question. I was looking at the same-day permit process or permit clearances. I'm thinking if there's a risk that is posed by such same-day permit clearances, which actually violates SHPO and GHRD's own policy. Should the legislature consider statutory timelines for permit review to enforce consistency?
No. Oh, with you.
I hope not.
Mr. Duan?
And only because it varies on different situations. And we don't want to be upheld to, you know, we put it upon ourselves an internal clock already of what we expect to get these permits out, of 5 days. And if we need more time, then we request to the customer, we inform the customer that we need more time to review, right? And within the federal side, we've got 30 days to reply for Section 106 reviews. You know, and if we don't reply in 30 days, then it's considered a concurrence, automatic concurrence from our office. So we've got already established deadlines already. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So basically, you're flexible in that sense. At this point, I don't really have a question at the moment, but, well, I do have more questions forthcoming, but I do want to give my colleagues more opportunity to put out their questions out there on the table, and I'm going to go back again to, you have no questions. Senator Therese, you're recognized again.
Yes, so for the SHPO, do you have a governing board?
Do I have a governing board? Depends on the definition of what a governing board is. The Historic Preservation Review Board is essentially, from statute, required to look at the nominations of the National Register and not necessarily an operational board.
All right. Because when we had oversight hearings, I mean, not confirmation hearings for some of the members of that review board who also serve as a preservation trust members, they are very willing and able to do that review work, but they said the meetings have not been convened in the past couple of years. But also, I remember going to those meetings because they were announced publicly by the review board at the time. Do you have authority to keep documents from the public auditor?
Only for federal projects.
What authority is that?
That is, I'd have to get back to you on that one.
What documents can you keep from the auditor? All documents?
No.
So, yeah.
It is. I don't know what the rules and regs on that is. I can look back on that.
I guess they were told that they couldn't review your process.
Well, they were looking at the permitting process. Yeah, that was all clear.
Pardon? No, they said they could not review federal, any ones regarding the federal.
There was, well, when it came to that, we had to ask, you know, because of again, I'm going to have to get back to you on what what statute says that we cannot share that information with the public. So I will table that for you for sure.
Are you unable to share permit applications by the federal projects?
No, I think it's okay to share that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that one. So you said the unauthorized imposition of requirements was a one-off and was corrected. What do you mean a one-off? It only happened one time?
Yes, in that sense, when the state archaeologists stopped the project.
Stop GTA. Isn't it also that they were trying to stop the bulldozing at EPAL, and then that's when the Attorney General got involved and said, oh, you can't stop anybody from bulldozing even though you've recognized these sites to be with historic value?
I believe so, yes.
And isn't it true also that at the time when this Stephanie Flores was appointed the acting director of the Parks and Rec and ordering the SHPO what he could or could not do, that they also, somewhere around there, removed you from any authority over telecommunications projects?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that still in place?
Yes, that is correct.
How do you justify that if you are the State Historic Preservation Office, that anyone can remove you from those projects?
I have been internally challenging that.
It's been years, though.
I know.
It says the permit process was changed prior to the audit. Exactly which process was changed? How?
So basically, in line with that one-off, we just had a personnel issue that kind of did not run the process through the way it was. And then when that one individual was removed from the position, then we started operating the way.
So you're saying that you have never, ever, outside of that one project, required developers to rebury human remains?
No, we have. But I'm just saying that it was my position that was implementing those requirements and not specifically another position, in that case, the state archaeologist.
So you can require reburial of human remains?
We go through that executive order that we still stand, and in consultation with the customer or the developer, we go over through the options, just like we do with any other project. Again, with the local statutes, the notion of human remains is taken at a whole different level of seriousness, really. And so we've pretty much been successful except for that one.
Well, because he was trying to require reburial of human remains close to the site where they were removed, as
Correct.
has been done for decades under that executive order.
Yes.
And if you're saying that was not something, well, they obviously wrote a letter to you saying you can't do this and you should never be requiring these developers to do anything like that, and that, and that you were removed from your capacity to take care of any of these telecom developers. I feel like all of this is the continuation of kind of that kind of stretch of authority, and I'm very much questioning that. I think for decades they had found a way to do what the statute says and treat human remains as sacred, important, and they had found their ways to do that. What you mentioned the authority of the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office under the federal government versus the Guam Historic Preservation Officer, and that there should be no authority above the State Historic Preservation Office when it comes to these duties, correct? That was the whole point of they were trying to remove politics from it, and they were trying to remove it in the Guam statute as well because of governors mandating what the SHPOs could or could not do, or which projects would go through or would not. But you said there have been people appointed, well, there have been other acting SHPOs. Who appoints the acting State Historic Preservation officers in your absence?
So usually it's a recommendation to the governor of who could, but it's really her decision of who has been acting SHPO when I've been away.
Oh, okay, because I've seen letters where the director of Parks and Rec was the one making those appointments.
Yeah,
appointing
he was
himself
acting
normally.
SHPO for.
I saw that in
Yes.
former governors. And signing off for the SHPO for the telecoms and special projects. Who's doing that right now? You don't know?
It's still officially under the director.
Director of Parks and Rec.
Correct.
Do you review those projects at all?
We don't.
All right. Yeah, so all of this, it says, there's also another statute that says problems of projects with potential impact on cultural or historic features may be resolved by the Guam Historic Preservation Officer through agreement or mitigation. Such resolution may include, but need not be limited to, project redesign, relocation, curation, and display of cultural resources, and land dedication to the Guam Preservation Trust. Guam Historic Preservation Review Board shall develop the criteria for resolution of any controversial finding in accordance with the administrative adjudication law. So there's supposed to be like an appeals board if the mitigation is not working out, but that never happened in that GTA case, right?
No, ma'am.
All right. Do you recall working with my office on draft bills to revamp this when we found out that they had stripped you of these powers and that you were being told that you could no longer require developers to rebury the remains or things like that?
Yes.
All right, and do you recall efforts by the Guam Preservation Trust to also revise these statutes? I think they even had a grant, if I recall correctly, yes, and that they had worked on it separately from your office and then my office, and then we tried to do combined, but there still are, I think, some not agreement of how all of it should fall out, but hopefully we will hear from them as well as to what their final findings were, recommendations. I think we did see their drafts, but do you think the statute then in current projects, are you requiring developers to where you have not already declared that property to be a state or historic property under the any of the registers? Are you requiring the developers where you have reason to believe that there are burials or other historic, that these are historic properties, that they would be eligible? Do you feel you have the authority to require the developers to survey those properties?
So basically, the stance that we take right now is we, as the government, is responsible for that. And if a developer would go on our time and our resources, it's not going to be too fast. And so they have the option of hiring an archaeological firm to move it along much quicker than what we have available. So we don't tell them based off of what came out of the AG's office a couple years ago. It's like, okay, we can do it, but I've got 2 guys to do it, and it's not going to be as quick as you would hope. And usually at that time, the developer just goes ahead and hires a private firm to work it.
All right, we have surveys, right, from the past. So these are decades ago. There were some surveys done. We just haven't done surveys of the entire island. But they are suggesting or recommending that the database, your entire database, be published. But I'm finding that curious when they were not even able to access some of your documents because those are with federal and they're confidential. Do you believe that the entire database should be published, or do you, I know that you had talked to me before about survey or maps that you can show all of the coastlines are going to be,
correct,
in a certain category, and other properties that you're aware of would be in different categories. Are you able to publish that, or would you like to be publishing your entire database?
We would love to publish as much information as we can for the sake of, proper planning for the public. We're actually in the process of plotting more accurate sites, because come to find out with GPS, some are not where they're it says our old documents were. So we are going back, doing re-inventories, especially with the National Registered sites. That's an ongoing project to get updated, data, pictures, information. But most, because of the development on the island is on the central and northern part, obviously that's where most of the surveys are. And so the bulk of the property that's unsurveyed is south, because that's not where the development really has been, over the history of our island. So that's really the situation is, but we don't have we're still trying to connect the dots, so to speak, as far as all the different surveys that's been conducted so far.
If you did a survey of a private property, such as Aruna, where the Lati sites are, and you can register private properties, correct?
Mm-hmm, correct.
You register them, and are they able to remove those, like GTA?
We'd fight for it, that they don't.
All right, it's just very disturbing to me because it seems whenever we have some kind of I don't know, it just seemed like a very heavy hand that came down and paved the way for certain companies, but not all, and that it was applied very unequally, and that now, I don't know, that we're not, I don't know what's our job if we're not going to be preserving these burial sites, and these ancient villages, and that we're going to allow anyone to tell us that, that can't be done. I think if we register those properties, that would be my priority of moving forward, instead of registering surveying the whole island. Register everything that we know or have any inkling about, get into detail on those, get them registered at a quicker pace, and then everything around them is kind of a higher review.
Yes, that's one of our missions.
All right. So you think in publishing a database, we had asked for publication. Remember the military, one of their requirements was to do, I forget the name of that document.
Sensitivity mapping.
Yes. And also a more in-depth kind of compilation of all the findings. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be made available to the public? I think it was supposed to be, but it has not.
Yeah, well, they're updating it, and it's supposed to have been done. So
no, by you, because they give it to you.
They do.
Yeah. Are you going to make that available to the public?
Again, I have to check that provision of what is going to be deducted for public review. And I'll get back to you on that, because there's certain things on the sensitivity maps that cannot be public.
Are you going to redact anything from the people of Guam's property reviews?
Again, the answer is no, but also depending on the private landowner, and if there's some sensitive things there, we have to take that into consideration.
Because for the federal, the sensitive is graveyards, right? Mm-hmm. Graves, because they don't want them to be looted. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't know, are you going to allow the private ones to be looted that are on private property, or do we not have a risk of that? Some of them are inside the fences, mm-hmm. very low risk. Some of these are, I don't know, already looted.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen violations being published. So yeah, we would all love to see a database, all the findings being published. All of this is the property of the people of Guam. The knowledge should be passed on to all of them and available to them. But it seems to not be that easy to access. And yeah, can you just, before we close, talk about the funding? So they're talking about separating your office, but BBMR said separating your office, there's just a small portion that comes from general fund versus federal funds. And I think in our budget, they had said that you are going to lose all your federal funds next year,
Yes.
or that this year, but you were going to use lapses to pay for your federal employees this year, something like that?
Yes.
So you have lost federal funds already.
It has not been, it's, on the big bad bill, it's zero.
Okay, so what is your plan going forward?
So there's optimism that on the federal side that's going to be put back in. So right now we've got probably a good 2 years of lapses that we can cover at least the upcoming year. And then depending on how that outcome comes, then we can go to plan B. But for the time being, we're okay.
Or just asking about the financing, that doesn't sound complete, but yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I'll circle back to you, Senator. I just want to throw some other questions myself. We're not closing yet. Just Mr. Ogden, on Guam Contractors Association, I just wanted to know, I know that GCA represents a private sector development community. Its feedback on the permit process and conditions imposed by SHPO is essential to crafting reforms that balance preservation with economic activity. So, sir, what feedback has GCA received from its members regarding the permit review process and conditions imposed by SHPO, and what reforms would you recommend to improve clarity, predictability, and legal consistency?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I work closely with the Guam Contractors Association, and obviously through Public Works signing off on their permit, and then CLB signing off on their permit, they're used to that certain speed. When it gets over to preservation, it really hits a slow process. I can only speak for CLB. Ours is very clear. If a contractor has a license, if a contractor is good with us, and when I mean good is if there's any complaints to that individual contractor, we bring him in, we work the issue, and if they're not coming in, then we don't sign any of their paperwork, any of their blueprints. So it really forces them to come in. The owner comes in, the big boss comes in and says, why won't you sign off? And then that's where we have a hold on them. So we have a real strong way to bring them into our office. So we resolve issues pretty quick. Because we work very close with Public Works, if Public Works has an issue with, they go out to a site and they find a site that they're not licensed, it's a simple phone call, location, our investigators go out there, we stop the project, we bring in the owner, and then we do some of our meetings, and we fix the situation. They run the permits, they get signed off. So they're used to that certain speed. Of course, they ask us if we can make a phone call to a certain office so we can rush their paperwork, and we say we can. You just got to bring it there. They have their requirements, and I can't speak to Preservation's office requirements of what they look for, but yes, there are concerns that, and it always comes up that it holds up their paperwork, and that's about it. So we try to help the process go through, but there's limited things that we can do outside of our requirements. So I hope that answers some of your questions, ma'am.
Yes, it did, and thank you for your answer. But with the delay, what is the normal turnaround? How long is the delay? Can you just specify how much delay do we experience? I know it's a case-to-case basis.
From the Public Works side and for CLB side, like I said, it's it's pretty fast. They're used to working with CLB, working with us, what their requirements. It's pretty clear of what the requirements are, so they know what to get. I guess when it goes to preservation, it's a different location. They have to do their own work. But when it comes to us, we're looking at something that's on a document, a blueprint, you know, and a blueprint, they know what the requirements are. So that's what makes it fast for us. They know how to build something. They know architectural work. They got that down pat. When it comes to us, they know what they need to do, certain licenses for certain jobs. They're leaning forward. They don't want to delay their project. So they're way in advance. So if there's plumbing work, they got a plumber license. They got A, B, and if there's a specialty, they got a specialty license on the blueprint. So they're good to go again. So they know what the requirements. I guess when they go over to preservation, they're talking about a different location, and that's what holds up their project. It's always a different location. With us, it's just a blueprint. So I hope that
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
On the preservation side, obviously, there's a lot of issues and things to consider. It's not just something that we can just decide upon and release permit.
Yeah,
Right.
it's research intensive, right? So we have to take the application and go back to our GIS, go back to the files of what was done before. So it takes time, and that's an obvious extended phase of the application process. But you know, when the developers or whatever they plan accordingly, then they take that into account of the planning scope. So I think we do actually a fine job turning over permits in a timely manner.
Senator, I just wanted to add, in the actual report, we do have a section on the application review timeframe. And so in the report, we say the average review time for the RC applications was 10 days, exceeding the 5-day policy. Only 22 of the 61 RC applications were reviewed timely, and the shortest being 0 days, and the longest being 55 days. On the COA side, the average review time was 37 days. And the range was from 0 to 205 days for applicates.
Thank you for that.
Again, that's a snapshot of
the whole.
Just based on our
yes.
sample.
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. And thank you for answering, Mr. Ogden. Appreciate that.
welcome, senators. Thank you.
Okay. For DPW, sir, I know that DPW leads many infrastructure projects that intersect with historic and archaeological sites. Early coordination with SHPO is essential to avoid delays and ensure compliance. So DPW is often the lead agency on, like I mentioned, infrastructure projects. How does DPW currently coordinate with SHPO during project planning, and what improvements would you suggest to ensure early consultation and avoid costly delays due to preservation concerns?
Thank you, Senator. That's actually like a two-pronged questions. One of the things we do, especially when it comes time for permitting, one of the first things we always look at is, has the property been pre-disturbed? If it's been pre-disturbed, it's been constructed on before, it's been cleared on, it's been graded on, that makes it easier for the two of us. Sometimes it's just a phone call between myself and Patrick. Sometimes it's just a phone call between the building permits administrator and Patrick. They communicate a lot more frequently than I do. For larger projects, say like a shopping center or a mall coming up, developers typically come to the office in advance, letting them know us know of their intentions. We sit down, we look at pre-planning, we do some pre-reviews and so on and so forth. And of course, we look at the properties and stuff. But I think, when in totality, when I'm listening to the conversation here, I think the public auditor is correct. I think if SHPO comes out and adjudicates their processes so that it's clean, it's clear. We go through the administrative adjudication law, and of course it comes through this body as well, so that the customers out there, developers, homeowners, contractors, even the government agencies are free and clear, and we're well versed in what the processes are with regard to SHPO. And everything's on the table, everything's black and white. I think that's all the people want to know. They just want to know what are the processes, so you don't have some arbitrary judgment out there. You don't have personal conflicts. Everything's in black and white, and this is the process, and it applies to everybody. I think once we get that, that's going to be a huge step forward in making the processes and the work within SHPO a lot more efficient and moving most of all, because I think that's what everyone says. There's so many delays, and then rightfully so. You know, if we're going to mandate all these issues that SHPO, or for that matter any other agency with GovGuam, if you have these mandates, you have to make sure that we give them the right resources. I don't know what the number is of applications that come through SHPO, but not in your defense, but I imagine you're a one or two man department with several hundred, if not 1,000 per year. So, you know, you've got to make sure that they have the right resources too.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And with your statement, it seems like the coordination is pretty much set already and quite streamlined. So I don't have further questions for you, sir. And thank you for your answer. Appreciate it. I'm going to circle back to Mr. Lujan. Sir, we tackled this earlier, and our auditor cleared the way that the insufficiency, or it's within the final reports that actually we kind of have a discrepancy. So the audit actually found that, and I just wanted to ask you, what internal reforms, because, okay, so there's lacking final reports, and the COA tracking is somehow inconsistent. So I just wanted to know what internal reforms has SHPO initiated to improve documentation and ensure that conditions are properly monitored and enforced?
Yeah, so again, you know, we had internal personnel shift that really was the solution to the problem. So we had the removal of one individual, and all of a sudden the process started moving the way it's supposed to.
So it's basically more a personnel
Yes.
type of situation.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, yes. Thank you for that answer. And this, at this point, I will circle back to Senator Teresa Lahi for her additional commentaries or questions. Senator, you are
Madam Chair, I really
recognized.
appreciate the time. So I think you removed the state archaeologist
Yes, ma'am.
who was working on the GTA project. What did they find at Alupeng? What was this big controversy all about?
I believe it was just, it was probably it wasn't moving as fast as the developer wanted it to move.
Of course,
Yes.
because why? What did the State Historic Preservation Office find there,
We found human remains.
right?
Yes.
Didn't they have a theory that that was also an ancient village? For a part of it?
I think that's
from
extending
Alupeng?
the probability. It wasn't that extensive, but we did find a good amount.
All right, so I know that, of course, the contractors want projects to move quickly, but I really feel like we have to get it right the first time when it comes to human remains. And in that case, it sounds like the office allowed the remains to be removed, and with a kind of tentative agreement that they would be reburied. And then all hell broke loose, and all the authorities came down and said, you can't tell us what to do. Nobody can tell us what to do, even if it's human remains. But I see authority in here where the SHPO absolutely can prevent the disturbance of human remains. Have you, since that project, found any human remains that should not be destroyed or disturbed in any of these developments since then?
In other developments?
Yes.
I'd have to go back and think.
Yeah. I'm worried that it's very much changed the whole program, and now we are approving all disturbance of human remains.
I hope not.
That's what that's a feeling I get, that it was complete and total intimidation of this office, and even removal of personnel, and now
Hence the need to revamp our local laws.
Well, we still have laws that say it's up to you to decide whether human remains are going to be disturbed or not. We also have the law for the permits that says you have the authority to prohibit activities listed in subsection A, which is the building permits, grading permits, all these permits, where there is evidence of adverse impact or potential destruction of cultural or historical features on the property, and it goes on. But I'm just, we have to balance this out. That's the role that you have, and so I appreciate all the work of everyone in all of this. It is an issue that we have to address so that there are no questions and there is no, I don't know, I guess we're going to have a showdown on what is the policy for Guam. Do we approve removal of all human remains for any developer, or only the special ones who get special authorities, or bypassing the SHPO's office, or which properties are we going to put on the register and which ones are we going to just ignore? Because those belong to people who don't want their properties on the register. I mean, it's a matter of whether we are going to treat these as important, or whether we're going to adopt the theory that these are all just for scientific study, we're going to remove them all, and then that's great. Or are we going to go back to our original, and that is human remains should be buried where they were buried.
Right.
We've required the military to comply with that. It's supposed to be we were supposed to be requiring them to the greatest extent possible to plan around this. And so I agree with the surveys that would help, but I also think there's ways to get that information out there that is not actually being done right now, the current information that we do have, and that the public should know. It shouldn't be requiring a hearing, or it's so secretive. What are the findings?
Yeah, it's not secretive, Senator. I mean, when they
I'm
have
just saying
customers
that
come to
as
the
a general
office,
term, because it's not anywhere that anyone
it may not be
can
online, but when they
veto.
come into our office, we share it with them.
Well, I say this is information that belongs to the people of Guam. They should be told. This is their heritage. What are we preserving it for if we're not going to let them know, and we're not going to have this whole generation grow up to know what was here, what remains of these ancient villages, and what does not, and what was destroyed. And I really appreciate the time, Madam Chair, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Terlahi. And I don't have much more questions to address towards the panel today. If we have further concerns and questions, we could email you guys, or we could have another round of informational hearing. But as of today, we're satisfied with the questions and the testimonies so far. And if there's a need to call you guys back, we will do so. I thank everyone for being here. And I thank you, Senator, for being here and staying back with me, and the rest of my colleagues, I think, as well. So, Siduos Masi to everyone who joined us today, whether in person or by submitting written testimony in advance. Your participation, insights, and commitment to Guam's historic and cultural preservation are deeply appreciated. I also want to thank all the agency representatives, community advocates, and members of the public who took the time to share their perspective and expertise. Today's hearing began with a thorough presentation of OPA Report number 2505 by Public Auditor Benjamin J.F. Cruz and his team. Thank you so much, which highlighted critical statutory ambiguities, operational gaps, and the urgent need for comprehensive mapping and updated rules. We then heard a thoughtful response from Guam State Historic Preservation Officer, Mr. Patrick Lujan, who acknowledged these challenges and outlined steps already underway to improve compliance, transparency, and interagency coordination. I'd like to also acknowledge and thank Director Vince Ariola for being here and for his testimonies and his input, as well as Mr. John Ogden, Representative GSA. Thank you so much for being here, sir. As a committee, our next steps will include working closely with all stakeholders to draft and advance legislative amendments that clarify agency roles, modernize our statutes, and ensure that our preservation framework is both effective and accountable. In particular, I am interested in and committed to actually exploring the creation of a Historic Preservation Law Review Commission, modeled after the successful Criminal Law Review Commission, and as a vehicle for community-driven, expert-informed law reform in this area. In recent months, we have heard polarizing voices advocating for financial austerity and even proposing to defund certain governmental operations that serve as stewards of our cultural and historical agency. We shall not entertain that. Let us be clear, historic preservation is not a luxury or an afterthought. It is the conservation of Guam's immense existing wealth, our stories, our places, and our identity. These responsibilities are entrusted to us under the public trust doctrine. These responsibilities are entrusted to us for a reason. So good governance demands that we prioritize historic preservation not only for ourselves, but for the future generation. So the committee will continue to receive testimony for 10 calendar days after the hearing. Please submit all your testimony by hand delivered to the Guam Legislature mail room here at the Guam Congress Building or via email at office of Senator Shelly Calvo at guamlegislature.com. The time now is 4:02 p.m. and this hearing is now adjourned. Undang Kalunsidus Masi to all of you.